At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar.
Okay, so everyone, thank you for showing up. I appreciate your being here. And I know that more people will be joining us soon. So, anyhow, it's exciting that everyone's here. Thank you again for being here. Let me start by saying that, first of all, I want to thank all the sponsors, when I say sponsors, partners for helping me with this series. You've got Plant-Based Solutions, which Daniel's in the house. So that's great because he's got a lot of great information to share. ECRM, Range Me, Social Nature, Whole Foods Magazine, Phil Limper, the Supermarket Guru, C-Suites Network, C-Suites Radio, and Big Orange Productions. And as you can see on the slide, today we're going to be talking about plant-based. And one of the coolest things about this is that it's so timely because there's so many disruptions in the traditional food system. And plant-based has a unique opportunity to help solve a lot of those issues and help a lot of the retailers compete more effectively. And we've got some strategies that we're going to walk you through that are going to help you capitalize not only on these trends, but how do you help make it easier for your shoppers to find your products on store shelves? So again, thank you for being here. So let's get started. So my mission is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by helping you get your products onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, including online. I decided to lean in and start this webinar series when Expo West was canceled, realizing that the best thing I can do is help bring you insights and experts to help you solve your biggest problems. And that's why we're here today. Do me a favor and share these resources with your network, with any brand wanting to grow sustainable sales. Remember, they're free. It's why we're here. You're not alone. If you've got topics that you'd like us to cover on this webinar series and my podcast, etc., please reach out to me and let me know what they are. And I'll do my best to solve and answer any of the questions that you've got. So if you don't know me, my name is Dan Lohman. I've had the privilege of working with literally hundreds of brands from pre-revenue all the way up to $20 billion in sales in the natural channel. And by doing that, I've had an opportunity to really see what's going on, what's driving sales. In fact, I'm the author of the Spins Distribution Tracker, and I share that with you to illustrate how I was able to help them provide more of the insights that you need. And I'm going to tell you about some ways to get even well beyond some of the data that they have now. So on my podcast, I mentioned it briefly. I just launched episode 191 this week, and I've got the leading thought leaders. In fact, Daniel's been on a couple times, as has David, his former partner, and a lot of other plant-based brands. So you definitely want to check it out. In fact, Tofurky, Seth Tibbett with Tofurky was on just a couple weeks ago. So you want to check that out. And also there are YouTube videos for some of the different interviews. So the weekly calendar, like I said, I'm doing this every single week. If you want to see what's coming up, then if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, then go to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/events. It's right down there on the bottom. Now, next week, I was supposed to deliver the presentation that I developed for the Canadian Organic Trade Show. I was supposed to give it to them at Expo West, but they've asked me to hold off on it and share it with you later. So that's been moved. So now I'm going to be talking about the 8 proven strategies to maximize your trade marketing ROI. This is something you don't want to miss. So I've got a lot of key tips and strategies and techniques that I'm going to share with you to help level the playing field and help you reduce your wasted trade spending. And then the week after that, Brad Barnhorn's coming on, and we're going to talk about the wisdom of unlocking the full potential of your leadership and your brand. And this is a must watch as well. Brad is one of the most sought after advisors in the natural channel. So you definitely want to check that out. So now, without further ado, let me introduce my special guest, Daniel, with Plant-Based Solutions. He was gracious enough not only to help partner with this, to help spread the word and help make these available, but he's got a lot of great insights to provide. So Daniel, can you please take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Dan, for inviting me back. I really enjoyed our the podcast kind of webinar version we did back, I want to say back in October, and got such great feedback, and you have such a kind of a diehard following because you're really providing such helpful information. You touch on an area that's so important that very few people really talk about. It's an area that was not my focus, which I'll get into in a second, but it's so necessary and needed by brands. So part of, kind of partnering with you, we're going to continue, I think, developing more material, to have on your site, and, I'll talk about a little bit about the masterclass piece that I had done. But plant-based solutions has been around for almost 10 years now. Really focused on develop, launch, and scale those three main pieces of a plant-based brand. So what does that mean? If you go to the next slide, in developing, basically, just to be very clear, we are a mission-driven group that is really focused on growing the plant-based economy, kind of, as a whole. And the way to do that is to help brands become successful. So everything from developing a brand, helping companies who, are at that stage of, hey, I have an idea, to how do you scale it and, bring it to market. We've taken multiple products to, Expo East, Expo West as kind of the official launch in the past. We've done product development work, recipe formulation, and a big part of it is also in finding third-party manufacturers, which is really key for startups who have maybe, done their beta test. They've been successful in getting and launched and, maybe in a small market, but now they've got interest and now they need to scale. So working with third-party manufacturers, private label, what have you, across the country has been key. And the next really piece of that is scaling their business, and that often falls into the capital raise. So you mentioned Expo West being canceled last year, or this past March, and we were set to hold a big event. It's kind of an annual event where we had mission-driven investors paired with brands looking to raise capital. And we were very thankful to turn that into an online, kind of a virtual summit. We had about 48 hours to flip it from the Sheraton at Anaheim to, to online. So the master class that you have up here is another piece. You and I have been talking for quite some time, and so helpful in, providing a lot of information and access, a lot of learnings. You started on the virtual side, even sooner, but we did see this as an area where we could continue to help brands. This kind of came out of, basically came out of a lot of the mentoring work that David Benzikin, who created plant-based solutions, and myself had been doing for quite some time. So I mentor with Chobani Food Incubator, FedEx. Last year, I was in Berlin for a week teaching at the ProVeg Food Accelerator. But you could only touch so many people in these kind of mentoring sessions. So we figured, let's get this online and reach more people. So we developed, and this was really a beta test, just like a brand, launches something and maybe kind of tests it out locally. We did a small group in the fall, and but it was really a lot of learnings, and we really just kind of walked people through the, what does it mean to develop a brand, go-to-market strategy, a financial model, really understanding what it means to scale, get into retail, what kind of digital marketing strategy, how do you connect to the consumer? And I think we're going to talk and focus on that today, both the consumer and the retail buyer, or your category, buyer in retail. And then moving into a capital raise, and we had some amazing guest speakers. So I'm going to just keep this out there. You can go to our website, which is on there. We're going to continue to offer a discount for people that you're working with. Maybe we could even do more as we get ready to do a new launch. It'll probably happen sometime later this summer. We're working on that now just because so much has changed. There's so much content out there. But I love what you're doing because you're, really making this accessible to, a large group of people. I think we're going to start off by going back to a lot of the interviews and just making those available at no charge, and then, figure out how to move forward. So if you go to the next slide. So just briefly, my whole career has been in food, basically. I started off as a chef. And then ran restaurant groups, kind of moved to the front of the house on the business management side, working for both retail, kind of traditional restaurants, to food service, which was Compass Group, Restaurant Associates, to then when I moved back, that was in Washington, D.C., and I came back to New York City, where I am now. And I worked for Starwood Hotels out of the corporate office, which was amazing, doing kind of concept development work for brands globally. When that ended in 2010, that's when I had an amazing opportunity to run what was a startup of Chloe's Soft Serve Fruit Company, a vegan alternative to frozen yogurt, which had some retail stores who were trying to figure out what to do with it. What is this concept? Do we franchise it? How do people consume it? Moved it into food service with a frozen pop, and moved that from manufacturing ourselves, delivering to multiple locations, to finding a third-party manufacturer. And I was just in the market yesterday, and was happy to see a whole new product line of oat-based Chloe's Pops. So it's been 10 years and it's still going strong. So after that, I basically, in New York City, there's so many startups. There was a lot of incubator spaces, shared kitchens, and was doing a lot of work with the kind of smaller companies, helping them develop their brands, go to market, and was lucky enough to do some product development work for Unilever. When that work finished, David, who we'd been kind of working together for quite some time, had brought me on board to run plant-based solutions because he had launched Ocean Hugger Foods. And after about a year and a half, he was more focused on that business and some other, kind of investment focused for plant-based. And I took over and acquired plant-based solutions. So we, work with from startups to mid-tier companies, international brands that come to the US in that space. So if we go to the next. And there's just some examples of some of the concept development, product development, brand creation work. If any of you are not familiar with the Nourished group, they used to be the GFAF, gluten-free, allergen-free group. It's a great way to get in front of consumers if you're a gluten-free or allergen-free product. So to rebrand them and kind of relaunch their website with our digital marketing team. Some great deep dives in with Forks Over Knives, which, in the plant-based space is just amazing. They were kind of looking at potentially growing or expanding their product development line of, packaged food. So there's a lot of analysis, market kind of research that we do as well for brands of bringing forward, kind of market strategies. And of course, work closely with the Plant-Based Food Association to help support all plant-based companies any way we can. So you can go to the next. So for today, just some general thoughts, after you and I were talking was really, when selling to consumers and the retail category buyers, both, a lot of understanding of the market space, consumer as well as the market space. You have to go back and communicate to the buyer. So the idea here was, the who are your customers, what your value proposition, what your messaging is, both on your packaging as well as the marketing message, which is maybe, your offers, what's on your website, messaging. The big where question is, where does your product, where does it fit in? The market at large, as well as the competitive landscape. And I think later on, you've got some great slides, Dan, to talk about the retail footprint of a typical retail store. And this is a big growing question. The what is really the product and the pricing strategy, which pricing strategy is really key. I think with that, you could also say your kind of touches on your marketing spend, your trade spend, which maybe we could touch on today, your amazing worksheet where you could fill in the different numbers on your marketing spend to try to figure out what kind of ROI. That's just fantastic piece. I think everyone needs access to that. And how is really the channel strategy? I know we're focused, heavily on, typically on retail. I do think it's worth opening, the conversation about the e-commerce side of the channel strategy, especially with everything that's going on with COVID, new ways to get to market. Last week or the week before, when you had ECRM and Range Me on, maybe that was 2 weeks ago. Amazing.
3 weeks.
Yeah. 3 weeks ago. Amazing insight. Again, another, great piece that everyone, if you haven't seen it, needs to go back and listen to that, of different ways to get both, into a retail channel, get in front of people. Maybe it's service, maybe it's retail, depending what your fit is. So that was just kind of a high level, I think, just kind of outlining for today. Like that. So I'll just jump right into, the plant-based retail market, has grown. These are some, older numbers, just because it's important to see how this trend has really been moving. Right, $3.7 billion plant-based foods retail in 2018, which was a 17% growth. I think we're looking at a 20% growth year over, if not more. And we saw how the dairy is just, more in the 35-45% growth, how it's outgrowing traditional dairy and plant-based analogs for yogurt, milk, ice cream, just, going back to the example of Chloe's with the new oat pops and Oatly ice cream and things like that. It's growing for quite a few reasons, but I think it's important to note that although it's growing and there's more and more, room for growth, retailers often aren't as tied in. And I think it's, the onus is on the brand, the brand itself, right? The founder who's out there, or your lead salesperson who's selling, to remind and to put data in front and trends in front of your retail buyer, to let them know, hey, the people, we can show, geographic data, the people in your market who are coming into this store, here's their buying habits, here's who they are, and here's what they're looking for. And then you could say, and here's where you're lacking, and here's where our product, fits in. And this has kind of continued to grow. If you want to go to the next slide. So here's an example. And I think this is very telling, because some buyers, have had conversations with, maybe it's a Kroger or, someone, or a Publix or, something, to say, well, that's a West Coast thing, this whole plant-based, right? Who really wants that? Or it's an East Coast or West Coast. But the reality is, if you look at these numbers, you could be in Kansas, in Minnesota. This is growing, and it's even moved since this first data was pulled together. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And interestingly enough, in a timely way, for better or for worse, the challenges that everyone's had with COVID, it's brought out a lot of health issues, around multiple, market segments, And a lot of challenges have been because of other health reasons, where people have gotten sick because they had underlying health issues. And we know that diet correlates to health. And I think this is going to be even a bigger impetus to push. We're already seeing it with investment into plant-based, let alone availability that happened. I think that's going to be a small blip, but I think the health issue is going to continue to resonate. And this is growing across the country. So when you see something where retail is having, a negative, let's say in dairy, and then you get a bump in plant-based, well, this retailer, that's their, that's the money in their pocket, and they need to fill in when their whole dairy section, is dropping off. Well, how are they going to fill this in? And then you're, coming to the rescue with a plant-based alternative. At least in some of these analog bases, it's great to kind of compare and contrast. So I think that was some interesting information that this is really continuing to boom across the country. Doesn't matter where you are. This is retail and the food service. It's the same thing. All right, let's flip to the next, please.
Whoa, I broke it.
Whoa, you broke the internet.
No,
Dan
I
broke the internet.
Okay, sorry.
That's
no.
okay.
Oh, shoot. Oh, there was a link on the presentation. Okay, my fault.
Oh, no.
There we go.
I always try to
there
link
was
my
embedded
okay.
link.
Okay. I always like to, show where the data comes from. So this was interesting. Again, just to try to put some numbers here, 62% plant-based claims rose from 2013 to 2017. This was a Nova Market Insight. And then plant-based meat dollar sales grew 265% over the 8-week period ending April 18 this year. So what does that mean? Means it's growing 6 times faster than conventional meat sales. So when all of this COVID hit, right, starting, let's say, January, March, or, March when I was in LA waiting to go down to Anaheim for Expo before it got canceled. So it was like March, I don't know, 5th or something. The sales been booming. And then we saw lots of articles, interesting articles where all of a sudden, meat availability was down. Traditional meat, pork, things like that were, not on the shelves. And it gave an opportunity for people to try, which I think is really interesting. And I'm excited to see what kind of data comes out of this 6 months down the road of the flexitarian market. And Dan and I were talking about this earlier. If you're not already pounding this drum of the flexitarian market consumer base, you need to, because that's everyone, basically. For a long time, plant-based was kind of, relegated to health food stores and to vegans and to vegetarians, and it was a really niche market. And now we're just seeing this boom where it's everywhere. It's in fast food chains across the country. That's where sales are. So that's what's exciting for retailers. Now that you go into, what was more a traditional retailer now has plenty of plant-based products there where they never did before. You had to go to the health food store in the past for these things. For those of you that remember, if you were looking for it 10 years ago, you found it in the health food store. So this is really growing. What's interesting about those buyers is that they are definitely flexitarian. We saw that even 2 years ago, the data on the increase in plant-based milk, for example, 70 or 75% of the people buying plant-based milk also had dairy products in their carts. Same thing with this, with these numbers. It's not representing, all the vegans went to the supermarket. It means your flexitarian market is trying all these new and exciting brands on the shelf, that are filling in multiple categories. So that's really interesting. And this was just showing that 6% global food beverage launches recorded, and this was back, almost 2 years ago now, used vegan-friendly positioning, which was up from previous. Now, there was been some talk about, is it plant-based, is it vegan? These terms are kind of, sometimes interchangeable, sometimes not, means things to different people. I think if at the end of the day, you're a great tasting food product, and you have a clean label and you're pushing that this is a plant-based, you're gonna, show great interest from both the buyers and the consumers that are starting to kind of wake up around this. Okay, next. So this was an interesting piece of information. I spoke a couple 2 years back at the IFMA, which is the International Food Manufacturer Association, and they were presenting to food service companies, but there was retailers there was people, Nestle and Mondelez and all the big companies were speaking, and this was kind of a wake-up call to the buyers, be it a food service buyer, a retail buyer, saying, what does the population look like? Who's the demographic? And what we're seeing is this idea between the boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and this idea of where the, ethnic, so you start on the left for the boomers, you're looking at a 28% kind of quote unquote ethnic, and this was just a slide that someone had put together that just showed a disparity between the traditional, Caucasian demographic to Gen Z. It now drops from 72% to 52%, or the ethnic community comes up to 48%. Well, that says a lot. And again, this isn't, just on the, Texas, Arizona borders. This is the country. This is what the country looks like. And the question is, when you're going into a retail buyer, you have to connect to, we know who your demographic is, and they may not know who their demographic is. They may think they know because they're a boomer that's been in that job for the last 20 years, and they just know what they know, right? It's what they learned. Oh yeah, maybe there's a couple more asks for a few things here and there, and they put them on the ethnic aisle, like they used to in the past. But now it's really broadening. There's diversification in flavor profile and ingredient decks and what people are looking for. So again, what problem are you solving for the retail buyer you're standing in front of? It's knowing the market, knowing the consumer, knowing what they're looking for, and saying, we've got the solution. I have the answer, because what your target consumer is looking for is this. And then you step in with this kind of data. So if you go to the next couple slides, this shows, it's a little hard to read here, but it's kind of breaks down the, population by generation. So we kind of started with the greatest generation all the way on the left to Gen Z, and where this kind of fits in for the population. So I think you got what is this in millions? So you got the 86 all the way on the right. So you could see where your target consumers might be from Gen X, millennial to Gen Z. So everyone kind of understands who their target consumer is, but it's really important to balance this with what was just on that previous slide and understand where the demographics are going, and how does that relate to product development? How does that relate to selling in and solving, problems for the category buyer to say, hey, we have something that we know your community is looking for. So we go to the next slide, please. So here's a couple call outs from that. African Americans are 48% more likely than the average US consumer to incorporate plant-based foods. Asian Americans, 47% more likely. Hispanic, 46% more likely. And Caucasian millennials, 47% more likely than the average US consumer. So a big call out for a reason for this is plant-based has been a staple within Hispanic and Asian communities for, forever. It's been a big part of it, but we also know for health reasons, specifically the African American and the Hispanic community are trying to fight and push back obesity, type 2 diabetes, other types of, health-related issues that their communities are facing at a much greater, percentage than the whole. And they're pushing back as being the strongest plant-based consumers that are in the marketplace. So yes, sometimes we hear about, the Whole Foods, kind of product, and it's very expensive and it's for a certain affluent demographic, or I can't tell you, Dan, how many companies I talk to where, we're doing development work with them and defining their consumer. So I call it, it's the mirror consumer, right? Because the person who's developing this product usually looks in the mirror and says, oh, I'm the consumer, right? It's, and it's always like, yeah, it's the yoga mom and it's this, and it's always the same. It's like, that's not the marketplace. You have to also understand who the marketplace is and making sure that products are being developed for them. And the marketplace or the demographics of the country are changing, and it's really important to match that, be it from more diverse, founders to just developing new product lines that are, fitting in, what's missing in the marketplace right now. Okay, if you go to the next. So this was kind of touching on the online versus retail by generation. And you can imagine that there's going to be, more in, how should I say this? There's going to be, less people from a much older generation buying e-commerce. But it's important to keep in mind that the marketplace is changing. So yes, we'll talk about trade marketing and how to get in front, but it's really important to understand that there are just swaths of the population that never, and when I mean never, I was shocked, they never walk into a supermarket. It's just like confusing to them. Like, well, why would you go into a supermarket? Now, obviously it's more urban, but, foods get delivered, right? There's all these, things out there from here in New York. There's Fresh Direct, there's, Amazon. So they just don't even walk into a supermarket. So how do you, do the same type of, be it a trade spend or is it a digital marketing spend? How do we, communicate to those? So if you go to the next slide, please. So the retail spend per trip by generation was also interesting. And it could just be, a question of, wanting to buy, willing to pay more for premium products, for plant-based products, for clean label products. But millennials can be expected to spend the most money, on average $57 per trip, relative to other generations. So again, when it comes to competitive set pricing, it's not just a comp set with thinking, okay, is the retiree who's on a fixed budget going to be, shopping on that, what's the price per ounce, comparison? Or is it someone who says, hey, I'm going to spend the $10 on a ready to drink, protein plant-based smoothie with probiotics and, and not do that comparison shopping, because it's about the brand, it's about, the product offerings, the benefits of the plant-based product. So just, again, know your target consumer, and then make sure you're kind of directing all of your marketing strategies to that person. And this goes back to that kind of, even on the trade spend part, how do you speak to them when they do walk into the store? How do you stand out, from packaging design to placement? Where do they find your product? How do you get it in front of them? So again, it's not just who they are, but knowing that they're going to spend more money is really important. Okay, go to the next, please. So consumer insights, this was a little more that came out of some of the product development work that we do, just in terms of understanding the consumer and why they're purchasing in a certain way. So this was 39% of Americans actively trying to eat more plant-based food. This was a little call out showing the growth in veggie noodles, you know. People really looking for nutrients, health, and just incorporating plant-based. So this kind of speaks to that flexitarian, you know, it's a doctor telling someone, hey, once a week, you know, twice a week, have a meal without meat in it. You know, it'll be better for you. You know, now personally, I'm vegan, so all my meals work out that way. But when you're, you know, looking at thinking about your target consumer, it doesn't have to be so focused on that plant-based consumer. You want a broader, you know, broader swath of consumers that are walking into a Target, a Walmart, a Costco, a 7-Eleven on the side of the highway to get gas. If your product is there and is, you know, speaks to them, that's a big business that you can grow. Go to the next one, please. So the plant-based plant-based motivators. This was really interesting. This speaks to, again, this kind of flexitarian concept, at least on the plant-based side, for why are people looking to eliminate meat? And, you know, I deal with this just in general conversations within the plant-based community. Many people arrive to plant-based for different reasons. You know, so you have kind of the, and this is a comparison of the flexitarian to the vegan vegetarian. So you have the, starting in the top left, generally to improve my health and well-being. Interestingly, on the vegan, you know, side, that's only, you know, about a little bit over a third. A specific health reason. So again, we're talking about, you know, cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, things like that. They're fighting a particular, you know, disease, maybe bringing it to them. Animal rights, animal welfare. Obviously, for the vegan vegetarian community, that's a much larger. Sometimes to save money. So, very interesting concept there on the flexitarian side. So you got 21% of the people saying, "Hey, if I don't buy meat and I can make interesting meals and not buy meat, I can save some money here." Now, traditionally, that may have just meant rice and beans and veggies, but what products are you bringing to the market that could also be, you know, cost effective, you know, to help out families economically? And then environmental reasons, of course, more, you know, more of a call out for the vegan vegetarians. But interestingly enough, more flexitarians are starting to learn from the vegan vegetarians, or they're learning from somewhere, that there's a direct tie-in to environmental health. You know, we look at it as, you know, health for, you know, the planet, which obviously incorporates, you know, everything. So, you know, the animals, the people, you know, and just the planet, and that relates to water and carbon emissions and arable land, you know, in dealing with population growth. So recent study from DuPont, I'll just call this out, and health, nutrition and health found 52% of US consumers are eating more plant-based foods, and that they believe it makes them feel healthier. So again, motivation often relates to, you know, aspirational. They're seeing it on TV, they're seeing it portrayed in media, they're seeing it portrayed in, you know, superstars. There's just a whole ad campaign for Beyond Meat. I think it was Beyond Meat. It was an Impossible. One of the two. You know, and again, very interesting. They had Snoop Dogg and an entertainer, a singer, and these probably, you know, they're probably investors in the companies. But what they're talking about is flexitarian. They're not saying go vegan. They're just saying, hey, reduce meat when you can. And it's really important to understand this and to share this kind of information with retailers who just think, oh, I already have one of those. I don't need another one. Someone wants plant-based. Oh, I've got that one product over there that says plant-based. But, you know, any consumer is going to want diversity of products, right? There's so many that are just, you know, there's taste differences, there's flavor differences, listen, there's some products out there that aren't so great. You know, we've all tried those. So happy to see more on the shelf. That's okay. You can go to the next slide. 69% consumers trying to eat more veggies and more fruit, 22% trying to eat more nutrient-rich species, meaning, this is kind of speaks to the biodiversity of plant-based. So when you're thinking about maybe product development, a lot of the work that we do at Plant Solutions is to help companies in developing their product lines that aren't just another, what's on the shelf. If someone comes to me and they've got another soy protein burger, I'm pretty, not so interested in, in helping to develop it because there's so many out there, but if someone's open to saying, how do we, kind of compete with the marketplace? Where's their white space? Say, oh, okay, now let's talk. There's pulses, there's, chickpea protein, there's lentils, there's oat, there's mung bean, there's so many interesting ingredients out there that if you come to market with something unique that stands out, that's very interesting. So people are looking for that. And there's starting to, be a little pushback in some areas of health and nutrition around some of the heavily processed plant-based products that are on the marketplace. Okay. So this really just speaks to, I think it's just the last slide in that group of plant-based proteins in the US of where we were seeing, this idea of what plant-based proteins do you eat, so you've got rice, potato, wheat, pea, soy. I think this was just a questionnaire that went out there. And how much do you agree or disagree with the following? And this is the following statement, and I don't know if you could read it, but it says, I need more protein in my diet. So interestingly, there was a high group of let's see, this was, sorry, the bottom here is the age grouping. So 18 to 34 saying that they felt like they need more protein in my diet. This, I'll just leave open as I think it's up to us in the plant-based community to kind of counter some of what's been for a long time just a marketing tool of the meat and dairy companies saying that you need so much protein, and the health community is saying, health fitness, saying you need so much protein. I'll never forget David Benzikin when he was talking about Ocean Hugger Foods, and someone had asked the question about, his plant-based tuna alternative, and said, well, how much protein is in it? And he had the best answer of just, about how there's protein in plants, and at the same time, unless you're dealing with malnutrition, which does exist in the US, but on a much smaller case than the rest of the world, there's very few people that you meet that are really deficient in protein. And there's not a need for this let's try to shove more protein in product development because it has to match what's in meat or what's in dairy exactly. And I think that's going to be kind of an educational piece. It might take some time, but I think, the health, nutrition, there's this idea of what people think they need, and then there's the reality of how much protein are they really getting and, what's required. So I'll leave that to your own interest, or, something to look deeper if someone finds that interesting. Okay. And feel free to jump in.
Okay, thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for the great information, such great insights. And this is so relevant to what we're talking about. And let me kind of frame it this way. So let me take what Daniel was talking about and let's take it to the next level and beyond. The shopper journeys change. Our opportunity is to help educate the retailer about the products that they're selling, about how to help educate the retailer about the consumer that buys these products, your products. And so think about, from the consumer journey standpoint, how do we help the retailer? We need to think about the fact that the retailer wants to remain relevant. Relevant meaning against all their competitive threats in the markets, et cetera. Retailers want three things: a reasonable profit in the category, they want more traffic in their store, and they want a competitive advantage in their market. And if you can help educate the retailer about how your customer achieves those three objectives, this is what retailers really want. So the first thing you need to know, and I'll kind of go through these a little bit quickly, is you need to really understand who your retail partner is. You never want to assume anything. You want to get to know your retail partner and really get to understand what are their goals, what are their objectives. And then how does your, as Daniel was saying, how does your offering fit into that? How does it support that? If that particular retailer is trying to capture more of the flexitarian consumers or the consumers that are curious about this, how do you make it easier for those consumers to shop in that retail store? And so when you're thinking about how do you communicate with the retailer, always be thinking about, like Daniel said, what is the problem that you're going to help solve for them that is the same problem that they're trying to solve for their customers? And so we talked a little bit about this before I threw it in here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted just to illustrate why this matters. Years ago, David Benzico came to me and he wanted me to do an analysis on what was going on in the plant-based area. Unfortunately, none of the databases accurately reflect the way the consumers shop, especially in plant-based. And so I chose organic for this, but it paints a good picture. And what I can share with you is that when you start looking at these trends, if you look at plant-based, they're even more dramatic. So one of the things that Daniel was talking about is how do we communicate the value of this? And the point here is that, as you're going to see in a second, these are the trends that are driving every category across every shelf. So let me skip to the meat of this, no pun intended. And so total U.S. dairy sales are up 1.5%. Total organic dairy is up 12.1%. Organic dairy represented 9.8% of a $75 billion pie. That's a lot of pie. That's a lot of category. Total U.S. dairy sales without organic, if you remove that, means total organic sales were only up, dairy organic was only at 0.5%. What that means is that dairy, that small sliver of the pie, is responsible for all the sustainable growth across all the categories, especially in dairy. This, again, is even more true when you get to plant-based. So when you're talking about trying to understand these trends like Daniel was talking about, this is where this begins. And I'm actually the one who helped develop the database, the strategies for the database that the Plant-Based Food Association uses. And the reason that matters is because the databases don't accurately reflect the way that your customer, your unique customer, shops and buys products. This is something I talk a lot about. We'll get into that more in the podcast, courses, etc. But the point is, if you really want to understand what are the underlying trends that are driving sales, if you want to help your retail partner, this is where you start. So why does this matter? Customers are not clones. So we don't buy things because we're just like everyone else. And Daniel talked a little bit about knowing your customer. So have you ever gotten a great deal on something you didn't like? We all have. Well, committed natural shoppers, committed plant-based shoppers do not settle. They want what they want. And the idea behind this is that if you're selling a product that might be a little bit more expensive at shelf, well, that's probably cheaper in the long run when you think about the fact that you eat less of it, that it does more to give your body the nutrients that it needs. So as Daniel was talking about, it's not dollars times, comparing dollars and dollars to two different items. What we want to do is we want to compare the dollars to the value that the customer is getting. And this is why this matters. And this begins with understanding your consumers, Daniel was talking about. So mainstream solution providers, et cetera, tend to commoditize customers. In other words, all females are the same, et cetera. And when I started in this industry, this is how we looked at the world. This is how big brands look at the world. And unfortunately, this is how a lot of retailers look at the world. By the way, quick note, we got a couple questions coming in. We'll answer those at the end. And I forgot to mention that because of the bandwidth issues on Zoom, sometimes the slides are a little bit fuzzy, but we're going to make this available for you so you can go back and study it and look at it more on your own. So anyhow, how well do you know your customer? What I'm suggesting is you need to really get to know your customer on an intimate basis, same as you would a good friend. So this is exactly why I built my free turnkey sales story strategies course. The idea behind this is that if you had an opportunity to go to have a one-on-one conversation with each one of your customers, you would get to understand better what they need, what they want, how they buy their product, how they evangelize your product at shelf when they get home, etc. More importantly, when we're talking about educating the retailers, we're talking about educating the category buyers, etc., we need to make sure that we're communicating in the same consistent language. The Achilles heel of big brands is that when they talk about their product, they each have their own different spin on all the different sales reps, etc. We need to be in lockstep with the same passion as enthusiasm as everyone on the selling team and everyone within. Okay, sorry, we'll get to that. Sorry, I looked at one of the comments. Deborah, we'll answer your question in just a second. Thank you. So anyhow, then, so this is what we want to be paying attention to. What does your consumer really look like, and how do they buy products? How do they shop? So Daniel was talking about educating the consumer. Let's make it easier for them to buy. Well, a couple quick concepts: integrated versus segregated. This is the way that, unfortunately, a lot of retailers merchandise their store. So which is better? Well, the answer to that question is the one that puts the customer first. If we can put the customer first and we can help the customer understand the benefit of products that offer, plant-based products, et cetera, by putting next to their mainstream counterparts, this is going to help that retailer grow sales, et cetera. So a lot of retailers, unfortunately, they have the two sections right next to each other. What works best is when you completely integrate the sections within the store, as you can see here, and more importantly, when you integrate them within the category themselves. So for example, I did a project for Synopta, and they had a sunflower-based milk. And it actually did a similar project for Pacific Foods just recently. And the idea behind that is if you have a shelf-stable non-dairy beverage and you put it next to the dairy case, people will buy more of it. And the reason they buy more of it because they make that comparison between dairy and non-dairy. But they can't find, that doesn't happen if the category is somewhere else in the store. So by putting the plant-based products in with other products, for example, Beyond Meat in the meat case, and some of the other things that Daniel referenced, this is how you drive sustainable sales. So the best, cheapest, easiest way to do that is the illustrator help guide the retailer to where your product belongs on the shelf. And this is how we start differentiating plant-based from other products, but yet help the customers make the choices that are best for them. And this is just an example, something that I highly recommend that brands do when they're trying to illustrate how do they help the retailer understand where their product needs to be merchandised. Well, one of the challenges that every brand has is in retail execution. And I wanted to throw this slide in there because what gets measured gets done. And so as Daniel was talking about how do you work with the retailer, how do you coach them, how do you educate them, et cetera, how do you work with the consumer, using a scorecard is the best way to help make sure that everyone's executing properly so that customers can easily find and buy your products. Another key takeaway, and this is a pro tip, think about the market basket. Daniel alluded to this a little bit ago. Retail today is focused primarily on squeezing margin out of one single item. That's a huge mistake. The reality is that the plant-based consumer is going to buy premium products throughout the entire store that complement your product. And so if you can help the retailer understand the total market basket, the sum total of all the customers' purchases when they check out, and then work backwards, that's how you're going to help customers how you're going to help customers grow and scale. So why does this matter? Increased distribution, preferential merchandising, efficient trade spending. Daniel talked about that. You've got to understand when you're spending money, your trade promotional dollars, how do you effectively manage it? What are the things that are going to grow sales the most? Next week's webinar, again, you don't want to miss it. So check the events page of the website. Maximize your promotions. Category leadership. A category leader is any brand willing and able to step up and help educate their retail partner or help support their retail partner to guide in sustainable sales. Daniel talked about this a lot. Could not agree with him more. Higher sales and profits And then shopper loyalty. Shopper loyalty is not something that is embossed on a card. It's helping the retailer give their customers what they want, helping their customers have a reason to come back in a time and time again. And with that, we're going to answer questions, and we can stay past the hour. And so a couple of the questions. First of all, let me answer this. Daniel, if you could please put in your website again. There was an error in the website. So if you could please put that in so that people can find it again in case I messed up. I just copied it off the domain.
No
So
problem. I'll
yeah,
pull that in.
thank you. And so, again, thank you to everyone that's partnering with us on this. Again, Plant-Based Solutions. Daniel, thank you for being here. ECRM Range Me, Social Nature, Whole Foods Magazine, Supermarket Guru, C-Suite Radio, C-Suite Network, and Big Orange. And we'd welcome other groups to come in and be a part of this if you have any recommendations or suggestions. First question I got from Janice, will there be a replay? Yes, we will make this available for you. Let me get it processed. And I'm actually going to put it into my school, just because that's just one, video hosting site, and that way you can get access to it. And we will put additional content in there that you can get access to. For example, Daniel's talking about his masterclass. So we'll put insights about that or keep that up to date so that you'll be able to see, get some more information about how to leverage these strategies today and beyond. And then we got another question in the Q&A, and I think this might, okay, Daniel answered it. So thank you for answering the question in the Q&A. And
Yeah,
then,
I'm not sure if that went to everyone, but it just spoke to the idea of what's the difference between vegan and plant-based. And I do think it's important, especially, for the brand category, the brand, retail buyers, different people use the term, like I was at an event, and Tyson Foods and Purdue were up, sitting up on the stage talking about plant-based. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Because in the context, what they meant was they were adding soy, they were adding millet, they were adding other things to their meat. So to them, plant-based just meant there was plant added to their meat. And, my mind was blown. I was like, that's not what I consider plant-based. So I think in the vegan, speak, it means plant-based, no animal products. But for some, it does mean that they're adding less of a category or a product seal versus just an idea of adding more plant-based foods to your diet. So I think it's always, better to just define your terms where you feel that you need to.
thank you for sharing that. And if you've got additional questions, if we don't get to you, please reach out to one of us. We're happy to help you. Again, this is about you and it's for you. So please share this and help us spread the love and help us share these with the bigger community. On that note, to your point, Daniel, I agree with you. A lot of people tend to categorize things differently than we do. And this is, again, about all about educating the retail buyer, all about educating the consumer about why this matters. And on the podcast, for example, I've had great conversations with Chuck Muth and Seth Goldman, et cetera, Maiko Schinner, people that have plant-based products, Madeline Hayden, I could go on and on and on, Seth Tibbett with Tofurky, about why this matters and understanding that unique consumer. Back to that free turnkey self-storage strategies course. Why does your consumer buy the product? How do you help communicate that in your brand story when you're working with the retailer? Your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, a brand needs to, bring forward a complete, what we call the go-to-market strategy, marketing strategy, and share that with the buyer. And, here's our spend, here's how we're going to be driving, it's that push-pull, right? So we're going to be, pushing with maybe some discounting that you have to do or some, buy one, get one deals, whatever. But here's our pull strategy within your geographic area of this retail, location. We're going to be hitting from a digital marketing spend, maybe it's geotagged for Facebook ads or Google ads, but content on your website, I think, is key. So some of the work, for example, we did with Unilever in developing some products. One was a plant-based, kind of a plant-forward, vegetable-forward spread, kind of an alternative to hummus a little bit. But it was all about content on the website, right? Recipes, videos, how to use it as a sauce, how to use it in different dishes. Show people multiple ways to use your product, which gives them, higher velocity, maybe more day parts, instead of just like a dip that was for maybe the late afternoon or dinner, we had it with avocado toast. We had it with different ways that you could, use a product. So when you show a retailer, you've got so many cards in your deck that you're going to interest people, you're going to show them, you're going to teach them. That was a big plus.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And again, this is all about education. This is all about, don't assume that everyone understands everything about your product that you do. Daniel was talking about that. This is where you, the mirror concept that he was talking about, this is where you need to help broaden people's understanding. And we mentioned briefly about trade marketing. This is where you can really do more to grow and scale your brand by targeting that specific customer. In other words, having that conversation with the customer that relates to what you're saying. Critically important that you do that. And again, that's next week's webinar. So a little plug for that. Good question here from Vera. I'm going to take a stab at this, and then Daniel, I want your two thoughts.
Sure.
My belief is that if you put a plant-based product next to a mainstream product, that's the opportunity for the consumer to trade up or to make a decision about what makes more sense for them. So let me give this example. Maybe you've heard this before. If I go into a store and I buy the cheap generic bread, I'm hungry almost before I finish eating it. If I buy the best mainstream bread, then I'm going to be satiated for longer. If I buy the organic bread, and if I am what I eat, then those extra nutrients are going to fuel me longer. Therefore, the organic bread is cheaper. Now, let's answer your question. This is actually a project that I did years ago. I was trying to helped convince Annie's Homegrown to put their mac and cheese next to Kraft. So a customer walks into the aisle, they want a healthier product, and they pick up the Kraft because that's all they have. Well, there's nothing else to compare it to. However, if I put the plant-based, Annie's Homegrown, et cetera, whatever the product is, your product, insert name here, et cetera, next to it, then that consumer has the opportunity to pick that product, both products up, and compare them side to side and choose the product that best makes sense for them. Why this matters? Because by giving the customer a choice, this helps the retailer drive profitable growth in the category. So in other words, and I'm just making things up, let's say this box is $1.50 and this box is $2. Well, obviously the premium product is going to drive more profit into the category, more sales at the retailer. Okay, now let's think about the market basket. Again, what does your shopper look like? How do they buy products? When they buy your products, what else do they buy? If you can align all those things and help educate your retail partner as to why this matters, that's going to help them solve that problem. Daniel, okay, you put it.
Yeah, well, I just shared some more information or a link to the Plant-Based Foods Association, just because there's a lot more data there. But to go back to Vera's question, and there's a video that should be able to find on the PBFA website. They did some actual work with some retailers to show the uplift when you have the opportunity to sell, to your point, Dan, side by side with a, let's say there's a meat analog or dairy analog to your product line. Not everything is always, there's lots in the packaged foods, in the, snacks that's plant-based that, doesn't always shows contrast. A lot of people assume it's plant-based anyway, but ice cream, things like that. But there are supermarkets that still say, here's my plant-based section, and this is where you're gonna live. I think when that happens, I would try to have a conversation with them, because at the end of the day, they wanna sell more product, right? But it's like if you give, we used to joke around in the retail restaurant world, or the QSR, the quick service restaurants, if you, go up to a cashier and you give them a $2 bill, they just sat there and went like this because there wasn't a spot for a $2 bill in the tray, right? There was $1, a 5, a 10. So it was confusing. So what plant-based sometimes is doing is bringing a $2 bill into what's been tried and true categories, and they don't have a place for it. So they're trying. So try to work with them, just like you could try sometimes to find the right cost to put on the shelf. We've had trials that go on and say, listen, if you can compare, let's say, 2 different stores with similar demographics, right? One of their stores is 10 miles down the road one way, one's the other way. You're not changing the demographic. That's key to this exercise. And say, listen, for a month or for 60 days, let's try something. In your other store, even though there's always going to be a plant-based section in both, store A, put it in the plant-based section. For 60 days in B, let's put it next to the meat or next to the dairy, and let's compare the numbers at the end of it. And, we think that you'll learn something, we'll learn something, and see where the best spot is for you. It might be a way to kind of nudge them into what Dan said, I think what we know is that's where the flexitarian demographic is looking. Right? They're not looking for that whole plant-based section. That's a smaller market looking there. So it does curtail your sales, or you have to, let's put it this way, you have to do more heavy lifting to drive people over there. So I would just challenge the buyer in a positive way of saying, hey, I think we could get more sales for you guys as well in all your stores. Let's just do a trial. Are you open to that? What do you think? Again, how are you solving their problems? Bring solutions to them. Bring ideas to them that don't, disrupt too much their system, but, help them find a way to, get to where you want to be.
Great explanation. I mean, thanks for sharing that. And remember this, your job is to educate them about exactly what Daniel's talking about. It's a lot cheaper to put the product in the right location day one than it is to move the product at a later time. Mistakes like that can derail and bankrupt brands. We want to help you navigate against that. So remember, plant-based solutions, brand secrets and strategies, great resources. We are here for you. If you've got questions, reach out to us. If you want additional insights, reach out to us. If we don't know the answer, we're going to find someone who can help answer that. And there's a wealth of information within the partners, et cetera, that is going to help you grow and scale your brand and your store. Any additional questions? I know we're over time. If not, we can go ahead and end it here, and then you can just reach out to us.
All right. Thanks so much again, Dan, for having me to join you here, and looking forward to talking again.
I'm thrilled that you're here. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. And so we'll go ahead and end it there. And everyone, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Don't forget to check out the calendar of next events, of coming up events. And the trade marketing one you're definitely going to see. And I'm going to be doing a lot more with Daniel and plant-based solutions. So stay tuned for that, because there are a lot of synergies between what we do. And again, we're all here to raise the bar and to help you succeed. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.